Hello fellow humans, my name is Poppy and over the course of my lifetime I've learned, but sadly also forgotten, a handful of languages. Due to my interest in linguistics, I've also come across a lot of exciting research surrounding the cognitive and emotional benefits of language acquisition. So today I want to walk you through some of these perks and hopefully inspire you to pick up a new language, or if you're already working on it, keep going. Now it goes without saying that not every brain will experience every kind of benefit, but as a general rule, the items on my list are things that can happen to language learners. So why not try it out for yourself? Here are 10 scientifically backed reasons you should learn another language. Number 1. It literally causes your brain to grow. In 2012, researchers at Lund University wanted to see how the brain would change after intensive language study. So they tracked the mental development of language students against a control group of medicine and cognitive science students, who study equally hard, just not languages. The subjects were given MRI scans before and after a 3-month period of intensive study in their particular fields, and the researchers found that, while the brain structure of the control group remained unchanged, specific parts of the language students' brains grew. In just 3 months. These parts were the hippocampus, which is involved in learning new material and spatial navigation, and 3 areas in the cerebral cortex. Although he acknowledges that 3 months of intensive language study can't be compared to a lifetime of being bilingual, Johan Mårtensson, one of the researchers on this study, says there is a lot to suggest that learning languages is a good way to keep the brain in shape. So maybe it's time for a workout. Number 2. It helps you perceive the world differently. In 2010, Dr. Panos Athanasopoulos investigated the impact of colour concepts in bilingual cognition by examining the ways Japanese and English speakers perceive the colour blue. He picked this colour because the Japanese language actually has more words for light and dark shades of blue than we do in English. When testing, he found the Japanese-speaking subjects were able to visually distinguish between more shades of blue than the English speakers. And when it came to Japanese-English bilinguals, the ones who spoke Japanese more often were able to identify more shades of blue than the ones who spoke English more often. He also found that it isn't a case of proficiency, but just use. So as long as you're in the frame of mind of that language and surrounded by it enough, you'll begin to see more, colours or otherwise, too. Athanasopoulos says that by learning a new language, you're also unconsciously learning a whole new way of seeing the world. And while colour is a good visual indicator of this fact, he means it in a wider cultural sense as well. To quote philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein, "The limits of my language are the limits of my world." So I guess, conversely, acquiring more languages means losing more limits? Number 3, it can even change the way you experience time. The words languages use to describe events in the past, present and future can say a lot about the way that a given culture views and interacts with time spatially. This visualization of time shapes other aspects of communication and consequently our lifestyles. And in certain parts of the world, they don't even have words for the concept of past, present, future, or even time. From the hand gestures we use to tell a story, to the way we interpret bookings and appointments, it's all based on our lexical understanding of time. So once you begin to gauge the temporal structure of a new language, you also reshape the way you picture and describe events in the past, present, future, or none of the above. It's really fascinating stuff, which is why I already have a separate video up that delves into this phenomenon in more detail and presents the relevant case studies as well. You can find it in a card, or the description, or the end of this video. It'll be anywhere. Number 4. It can delay the onset of Alzheimer's. In the past, studies have shown that bilinguals show symptoms of Alzheimer's and other dementias roughly 4.5 years later than people who speak just one language, and the suggested cause for this was that bilingual brains have more cognitive reserve, meaning they're more resilient to damage. But more recently, a team of researchers in Italy looked at a group of 85 people with mild Alzheimer's disease, of which 45 were daily speakers of both German and Italian, and they found that although the bilingual individuals were on average 5.71 years older and had had fewer years of education, they still outperformed the monolinguists on memory and thinking tests. The scientists also examined the regions of the subjects' brains that had already been damaged by the disease, and found that the regular speakers of 2 languages were better at reallocating energy use to other regions in the brain and had greater connectivity overall, suggesting instead that their brains actually compensated for the damage caused by the disease. The team found the greatest benefit was seen in lifelong bilinguals who used both languages equally every day. So if you fall into that frequent use category, this could be helpful to you as well. Number 5, it helps you make better long-term decisions. In a study conducted at the University of Chicago in 2012, psychologists found that thinking in a foreign tongue reduces decision-making biases. Their research proposed that a foreign language provides greater cognitive and emotional distance than a native language might, which allows the individual to avoid being influenced by loss aversion and framing manipulation that causes more impulsive behavior. In other words, thinking or speaking in another language encourages deliberate, rather than emotional, thought processes. The study even goes as far as to suggest people who routinely make decisions in a foreign language rather than their native tongue might be less biased in their savings, investment, and retirement decisions as a result of reduced myopic loss aversion. So basically, buy yourself a house in a foreign country where you sort of speak the language but also have to concentrate a little. I'm joking. Well, not really. Number 6, it improves your focus. Harkening back to the idea of a mental workout, scholars at Pennsylvania State University have their own reasons for likening language learning to exercise. The results of one of their studies on bilinguals show that both languages are active at all times in such individuals, meaning that bilingual brains cannot easily turn off either language, and so they're constantly in competition with one another. Because of this, the mind is forced to juggle 2 languages non-stop. But don't worry, it's actually a good thing, and ends up reshaping the brain networks that enable skilled cognition, support fluent language performance, and facilitate new learning. They also found that bilinguals rarely make language substitution errors when speaking with someone who only knows one of their languages. Because both languages are always active, bilinguals do this thing called code switching, in other words, rapidly flipping between the two. Like this.
știu că asta am spus, but I can't make it anymore, I'm sorry.
Well, it turns out that code switching is an excellent form of mental exercise that helps the individual prioritize information. When there's so much going on in that head, you get pretty good at picking out the most vital parts, and have a heightened ability to edit out the irrelevant bits. According to a 2012 study published by Northwestern University, this increase in focus suggests that people with the ability to speak more than one language can also filter out unimportant input more effectively than monoglots. The study posits that multilingual people have better trained themselves to tune into only the most relevant linguistic input, while ignoring other auditory input. Number 7, it strengthens your memory. According to 2 studies conducted by Julia Morales of Spain's Granada University, bilingual children show an advantage in working memory that is especially evident when the task makes additional demands on executive function. The description of the study gets quite technical and numerical, so we don't need to go into those details. But the main takeaway is that children with another language are better at recalling memory than monolingual children. When completing memory-based tasks, they not only work faster, but also more accurately. In fact, the study even suggests these bilingual kids pulled information and identified problems in a more logical fashion. So I guess the effects of code switching and being able to focus on very specific inputs really do keep your brain at peak performance. Number 8, it can deepen your connection to other cultures. Being able to communicate in another language also unlocks the vocabulary specific to its traditions, religion, arts, and history. So once you have this greater understanding of the culture from a linguistic standpoint, you naturally become more empathetic and tolerant of it. Additionally, speaking other languages makes it easier to travel to other parts of the world, and once you see those parts, you'll likely appreciate them more. In an investigation by Jean-Marc Dewey and Eloise Boats, 651 speakers of 2 or more languages from around the world were asked to take the Multicultural Personality Questionnaire online. This questionnaire measures 5 traits that predict success in a multicultural setting: cultural empathy, flexibility, social initiative, emotional stability, and open-mindedness. What they found was that the more languages a participant spoke, the higher their scores were in open-mindedness, flexibility, and social initiative. So either the act of learning new languages develops these traits in multilingual people, or the kind of people that like to learn new languages are more inclined to develop a multicultural personality as well. Either way, seems like a win to me. Number 9, it'll actually make you better at your own native language. Yes, it's true, and it's highlighted in Alberta Education's Impact of Second Language Education study. Sure, you can speak whatever your mother tongue is well, and yes, you're probably at least average at spelling. But do you know why you do the things you do? Choose those words, choose that syntax? When you grow up speaking a language, no one has to kind of break down the rules and conjugations for you because you just learn through osmosis. And with that, you gain the linguistic ability without the theory. I've had many Spanish language teachers over my lifetime, and if I'm being completely honest, the one who taught me the least was actually a native speaker. And she was also my first, so that wasn't great foundation work. See, the problem was, she would often write things off as not rules, just things you had to know and memorize. And what I later found out was that we were actually dealing with the simplest regular verbs in the most basic conjugated tenses and modes, but we didn't know that. We didn't have the little conjugation tables. We were just expected to know. As someone who had been fluent in this language essentially since birth, she'd never had to think about the choices she makes, and she definitely didn't have the terminology for those things. Similarly, I shared this meme on my Instagram story a little while back, and every single reply was from a native English speaker going, no, but seriously, the what? Whether it's dealing with tenses, gendering nouns, noticing etymologies, or recognizing the context for formality of address, comparing your second and first language will allow you to appreciate the inner workings of the first. To quote the late author and journalist Geoffrey Willens, "You can never understand one language until you understand at least two." Which brings me swiftly on to my final point. Number 10. Learning one new language makes it easier to learn another. While there are numerous studies to back this up as well, I can easily speak from personal experience on this front. Building on what we discussed in the previous point, learning a new language can open your eyes to all the ways in which they can differ, grammatically, lexically, or even tonally. Let's look at the way we structure a basic sentence in English, a language that exclusively uses subject-verb-object order. For example, I, subject, like, verb, pasta, object. You wouldn't say pasta like pasta I, or any other variation of that. And if you're only familiar with English, you might assume that's the only way sentences can be structured. But oh no. Some languages are verb, subject, object, others are subject, object, verb, and some, like Latin, have no one fixed structure because they absolutely whilen. Something like the Romanian reflexive first-person unstressed accusative form would sound strange if you tried to put it in an English context. But as I'm sure my bilingual viewers know, that's the way a lot of languages do work. Additionally, there are other aspects of speech that we may not even appreciate the nuance of until we become exposed to other languages, like tone. In English, we only use tone to indicate whether a sentence is a question or not. Like, is this a question? Tonal languages like Mandarin, on the other hand, use shifts in pitch to change the meaning of a given syllable. So once your mind is opened up to all these differences, or even just aware that there can be differences, it makes it so much easier to pick up future ones as a result. When you make all these connections, you're no longer constrained by the rules you assume to be definite. And the more you acquire, the more addicting it gets. I have a very long list of languages I intend to learn at some point. So in conclusion, I strongly advise that if you have the time, of course, you should look into learning a new language as well. Or, as I say, if you're already working on it, please keep going. Speaking more than one language expands your mind both figuratively and literally, so why wouldn't you? So if you're planning on learning a new language, feel free to comment down below saying what your language goals are. And if you've experienced any of the things in this video, feel free to like it. In fact, maybe like it even if you haven't, that would help me. If you want to help me, that'd be nice. And if you really want to help me, you can subscribe to this channel as well. That'd be amazing. Thank you. Anyway, goodbye.